I only bet 10.
But you won.
What did I say?
Carmine Lupertazzi was the real boss of The Sopranos, not Tony. One silent scene proves it. Of all the brutal maneuverings, cigar-chomping bravado, and chest-thumping machismo that The Sopranos ever offered,
This hard thing we're into, they wanted a piece of it. I think they confronted Ralph.
nothing came close to the sheer elegance and menace of Carmine Lupertazzi ordering a hit without ever uttering the word.
Johnny and Ralph Cifaretto, right? Ralph insulted John's wife?
This wasn't just gangster, this was governance, a masterclass in quiet domination. Carmine, the aging lion of the Lupertazzi family, spent ample time trying to reason with the increasingly volatile Johnny Sack. But when diplomacy failed, as it often does in the mob, the old man didn't scream, didn't threaten, didn't lift a finger. Instead, he handed the problem to Tony Soprano with an exquisite lack of clarity. No names, no directives, just implications thick enough to choke on, and a tone that could have passed for a weather report. The brilliance? He never actually said anything. Try building a RICO case out of that. It was all done over his own home phone line, no less. Bold doesn't even begin to cover it. Carmine essentially put the blood on Tony's hands without so much as breaking his stride, or, more appropriately, interrupting his lunch. And that's the terrifying beauty of it. The entire scene hangs on subtext. The writers delivered a conversation where everything happens between the lines, and in doing so, they crafted one of the most chilling, iconic moments in the series.
But he's fucking my wife, Carmine. I want him dead.
Subtlety, not spectacle, was the weapon of choice. A far cry from Tony theatrically letting Uncle Junior pretend to be boss. Carmine didn't need to play dress-up to assert authority. He just was the boss.
Carmine Lupertazzi. He passed during the night.
His death, naturally, matched the tone of his life. Quiet, low-key, vaguely ridiculous. Choking on an egg salad with too many gherkins. Because of course that's how a mob boss goes out. Not in a hail of bullets, not in a courtroom, but in the open air, lunch in hand. Sunshine, sandwiches, and sovereignty. He died a free man, never whacked, never incarcerated. He walked away clean, something few in that world ever do. Call it poetic justice or just dumb luck, but he basically won.
The feds just hit Johnny Sack.
Even the timing of his demise was tactically convenient. Had he stuck around much longer, he'd likely have been dragged down with Johnny Sack when their top guy inevitably flipped. His exit spared him the indignity of prison, or worse, death at the hands of a friend turned liability. And let's not forget the irony. Ginny Sack, unwittingly, saves her husband and Ralphie simply by existing. A subplot that spirals out from vanity and insecurities ends up rewriting the fate of two high-ranking mobsters. That's the kind of narrative layering lesser shows dream of pulling off. Carmine saw the chessboard clearly. He knew Tony and Johnny were close, friends even, but he also knew Tony could be counted on to protect his own interests above sentiment. There was no money to be made from whacking Johnny Sack, not directly. This was about principle, territory, keeping capos in line. Tony would never say no to that kind of power consolidation, especially if it came dressed in plausible deniability. In the end, Carmine Lupertazzi proved that real authority doesn't shout. It doesn't even speak. It just is. Tony Soprano wasn't rich. In fact, in real-world terms, he was embarrassingly broke. In a show obsessed with power, reputation, and the occasional meat cleaver, The Sopranos offered a less than flattering financial portrait of its mobsters. Despite all the posturing and bravado, one thing becomes glaringly obvious. These guys weren't exactly swimming in billions. The real money? That lived elsewhere, and it wasn't wearing tracksuits. Let's begin with the obvious candidate, Hesh Rabkin. A quiet powerhouse in terms of wealth, Hesh is one of the few characters with legitimate longevity in the business world.
I don't know him personally, but I know his history. In the late 50s and 60s, he owned F-Note Records.
He's been making money since the 1950s and, more importantly, knows how to keep it. When he estimates Tony's net worth at just under $6 million, It's not admiration, it's thinly veiled disdain. He practically scoffs at the number, suggesting Tony should have amassed far more. Unlike Tony, Hesh doesn't waste cash on ego or impulse. His money isn't loud, it's effective.
It's good for little Carmine, then. His fucking wallet is tied to the goddamn Esplanade, goddammit!
Second place, little Carmine, bafflingly. Despite his Shakespearean vocabulary malfunctions and general aura of confusion, Carmine is a legacy baby with access to serious capital. And then there's Carmine Lupertazzi Sr., the subtle heavyweight. Old school to his bone marrow, Carmine Sr. may have preferred understated luxury, $1,000 suits, a Cadillac, and a Rolex. But don't let the modesty fool you.
Right. See, Carmine's got major income besides construction. Johnny don't.
As boss of one of New York's 5 families, he had access to a revenue stream so vast it made the Esplanade project, which itself made Tony and Johnny Sack rich, look like a summer bake sale. When that project got shut down, Carmine's reaction was a shrug. A man with enough diversified income to not care in the slightest. And speaking of diversified income, Devin Pillsbury's father deserves mention. His wealth doesn't just eclipse Tony's, it mocks it. While Tony plays gangster with his 1 or 2 major rackets, Devin's dad likely signs off on deals the size of the Esplanade several times a year. His art collection alone, Picasso's, not Ladro, thank you very much, signals a world so far removed from mob money that it might as well be another planet. The mob isn't scary to people like him, it's quaint.
Could be as good as garbage.
Hey, garbage is our bread and butter.
Was.
Therein lies one of the show's most biting themes. The mob, in the modern world, is financially and existentially irrelevant. The Sopranos quietly but persistently underscores that the powerful gangsters are, in reality, minor players. Wall Street executives and corporate predators dwarf them in both scale and sophistication. The only meaningful distinction between Tony and these corporate sociopaths? Tony occasionally has someone whacked. The rest of the dirty tricks, wiretaps, shady backdoor deals, manipulation, are shared tactics, just executed with different suits and lawyers.
This is a beautiful, beautiful home.
Smaller than my Hamptons crib, but...
And then there's Massive Genius, the one-hit music mogul who radiates the aura of wealth. He appears once, makes an impression, and leaves. It's hard to ignore the irony. One of the richest characters in the show has the least screen time. That's about as poetic as The Sopranos gets. Let's not forget the side note of Frank Sinatra Jr., a reminder that celebrity and legacy can sometimes command as much gravitas as a mob title, without the legal headaches. Also worth a mention, even if absurdly, is the random detour into a homeless character with a newspaper shoved somewhere unmentionable, an unintentional metaphor for how the mob's relevance has been treated by modern capitalism, tossed aside, laughed at, and ultimately forgotten. So who's the richest in the Sopranos universe? Hesh among the regulars, Carmine Sr. among the bosses, Devin Pillsbury's father among the civilians, and the real kicker? None of them need to break a sweat or a kneecap to keep their wealth flowing. The mob may know violence, but these people know compound interest. Tony Soprano was never rich. He was just really good at looking like he was.
Take her back to Green Grove.
What, the nursing home?
For all his bluster and bravado, Tony Soprano, the supposed kingpin of North Jersey, wasn't exactly drowning in riches. In fact, according to The Sopranos creator David Chase and technical advisor Dan Castleman, Tony's liquid assets sat somewhere around a paltry $1.5 million. Yes, that's right. After all the shakedowns, backroom deals, extortion, and blood-soaked racketeering, the man was sitting on about the same nest egg as a decently successful orthodontist. This figure is notably lower than what Hesh, a shrewd observer of mob finances, estimated on the show. But then again, Hesh also pointed out what most viewers had long suspected. Tony spent money as fast as he made it.
I only bet 10.
But you won.
What did I say?
A compulsive gambler, a lavish consumer, and a man utterly allergic to long-term planning, Tony embodied the financial strategy of a teenager handed a platinum credit card, without the looming fear of his parents finding the bill.
It's that boat.
Yes, he had assets. A suburban McMansion that likely appraised around $2 to $3 million in early $2000, a depreciating boat, a few legitimate business interests laundering just enough income to keep the IRS barely appeased, maybe a Cayman account or two with enough tucked away to buy Carmela some designer morning clothes. But wealth? That requires discipline, something Tony never had, unless you count his relentless discipline in avoiding therapy homework. The distinction between what Tony had and what he was worth is crucial. A man can appear rich while hemorrhaging cash. The $1.5 million figure often gets confused as a net worth, but it likely referred to available cash or earnings at any given time. Another interview from 2006 puts his net worth closer to $5 to $6 million, which, while not insignificant, still places him closer to a regional dentist than a criminal titan, especially when his lifestyle was less retirement planning and more set fire to it and see what burns.
Me? My own wife, 40 grand from the bird feeder.
And let's not forget the $45,000 in the bird feeder, because nothing says financial sophistication like hiding tens of thousands of dollars in lawn decor. Of course, some funds were tied up in pensions from his legitimate fronts, deferred compensation, insurance policies, and the like. And thanks to his ambiguous, possibly final demise, any impending federal case would have died with him, leaving Carmela with the spoils. A tragic end for Tony, perhaps, but a well-timed windfall for the family trust.
Fucking A. What did you think?
You're only as fucking smart as this week's lines.
But it all feeds into the larger truth of the life. It is designed to keep its participants hungry, literally and figuratively. If the guys at the bottom were financially secure, they'd have no reason to stick around, no motivation to take the fall or pull the trigger. The system works best when everyone's just solvent enough to survive, but never comfortable enough to leave.
She left me an inheritance, Stone.
Just over $2 million.
Take Eugene Pontecorvo. He inherited $2 million and immediately began fantasizing about Florida retirement. That kind of security is lethal to the lifestyle. And that's precisely why laundering money is such a blessedly inefficient process. It keeps the foot soldiers poor, restless, and ready to risk everything just to get ahead. Tony himself never escaped that cycle. The financial habits forged in his early years, blowing cash on suits, steaks, and strip clubs, were merely scaled up as his income increased. He didn't build wealth, he just built a larger engine for consumption. In the end, he wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a compulsive spender with a criminal enterprise, a mob boss without the makings of a CPA, Seton Hall's finest. Tony Soprano wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was just the least disastrous man in a crew of emotional wrecks and impulsive liabilities. Tony Soprano's reign over North Jersey wasn't so much a product of strategic brilliance or fearsome dominance. It was the unfortunate result of surrounding himself with a cast of emotional wrecks, junkies, and yes-men. One could generously describe the New Jersey outfit as a crime family, but only in the way a backyard puppet show is called theater. Tony's real genius wasn't leadership. It was simply occupying a vacuum where ambition went to die. Before Tony's ascent, there were at least glimmers of competition. Under Acoli DeMeo and later Jackie Aprile, potential successors and challengers existed. Tony, Jr., and Jackie himself all circled the top seat with varying degrees of influence and credibility. But the moment Tony slipped into the boss's chair, the rest of the family effectively rolled over and played dead.
Whatever happened to Gary Cooper?
His capos? A spectacular parade of dysfunction. Ralph Cifaretto was erratic and unstable, a walking HR disaster who self-destructed in record time. Paulie Walnuts, ever loyal, was also impulsive and too emotionally volatile to organize anything more threatening than a lunch order.
John, this is Christopher.
Christopher Moltisanti was too busy chasing his next high and screenwriting dream to pose a real threat. Bobby Baccoglieri, sweet as he may have been, possessed the political savvy of a houseplant. Even Silvio Dante, calm, calculating Silvio, demonstrated in his brief stint as acting boss that the big chair was several sizes too large. Tony, ever the opportunist, was acutely aware of the quality, or lack thereof, surrounding him. He didn't have to be Machiavelli to stay on top. He simply needed to stay out of rehab, keep his tantrums fewer than Polly's, and refrain from being publicly unhinged. The bar wasn't just low, it was underground. Contrast this with New York, where the mob resembled something closer to a functional hierarchy. Carmine Lupertazzi Sr. had an embarrassment of riches when it came to potential successors. Johnny Sack, Carmine Jr., Phil Leotardo, Butchie, and others. The very abundance of leadership material led to chaos after Carmine's death, a classic case of too many sharks in the water. The civil war that followed was inevitable, a problem of overabundance, not scarcity. In contrast, New Jersey's biggest internal crisis was whether Polly would accidentally offend someone in a nursing home, or if Christopher would pass out before a hit. The only potentially viable alternative was Larry Barise, capo of Jersey's largest crew. Unlike Ralphie and Richie Aprile, both brilliant in their own self-destructive ways,
Fucking Larry Barisi, too. I got friends in federal holding that would like nothing better.
Larry had a rare commodity in Jersey: restraint. He was prudent, measured, and seemed to understand the virtue of staying under the radar. Unfortunately for him, indictments cut short any potential rise, and had he stayed free, it's likely Tony would have added him to the growing list of problematic capos who mysteriously disappear.
Where's our fucking money?
Tony's grip on power wasn't a testament to strength. It was the absence of viable challengers. New York saw this clearly. To them, Jersey wasn't a true family. It was a glorified crew.
Carmine always said the Sopranos are nothing more than a glorified crew.
And Tony, the biggest fish in a rather unimpressive pond. Had he come up in New York with real competition and actual infrastructure, Tony Soprano wouldn't have made it past capo. His empire wasn't built on loyalty or strategy, but on the comforting knowledge that no one around him was competent enough to threaten the throne. In the end, the tragedy of Tony Soprano's leadership is not that he was too strong to be challenged. It's that no one else was strong enough to try. Forget everything you think you know about The Sopranos ending. It's not deep, it's lazy. Ah, The Sopranos finale. Television's great Rorschach test. Did Tony live? Did he die? Did David Chase just troll an entire audience with a sudden blackout? While fans continue to dissect that final cut to black like it's the Zapruder film, some bold minds have proposed an alternative. Less ambiguity, more absurdity. Or, depending on your perspective, clarity via chaos. Let's begin with the most grounded reimagining.
You know, the government's using electronic surveillance and...
Tony, cornered by fate, is arrested by a swarm of FBI agents in Holston's, the final supper interrupted by a federal buffet of justice. Fast forward years into the future, and Tony, graying and wrinkled, is a man alone in a prison cell, meditating on life with the spiritual serenity of a Buddha who once ran a waste management firm.
Waste management consultant.
A cheese sandwich arrives. Spartan, pitiful, symbolic. He holds it to the radiator like some makeshift Eucharist. And then, in a moment that would leave film professors clutching their pearls, his face slowly morphs into Gary Cooper's.
I said, the kind of man I admire is Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type.
Yes, that Gary Cooper. Because apparently, Tony was the strong, silent type after all, buried beneath layers of gabagool and repressed emotion. Subtle? Hardly. Effective? Debatable. Memorable? Absolutely. Then there's the more anarchic approach, Why settle for ambiguity when you can have every possible outcome? Don't cut to black, cut to everything. Tony gets whacked. Tony lives forever. Tony joins a witness protection program. Tony becomes a motivational speaker in Arizona. Each ending plays out like a choose-your-own mafia adventure. The audience is left not with a question mark, but with a shattered kaleidoscope of answers, none of them definitive. Mission accomplished. Total narrative overload in lieu of a singular truth. For those insisting Tony would never snitch, there's a rebuttal tucked in like a poisoned cannoli.
Guys today have no room for the penal experience.
Of course he would. Faced with decades in a cell and a future consisting entirely of government-issue cheese sandwiches, even Tony Soprano might sing, especially if it meant protecting Meadow and AJ. The show flirted with the idea of self-preservation over omerta often enough to make the betrayal plausible. The mob life may be about loyalty, but The Sopranos was always about the limits of that loyalty when survival is on the line. And then, because no reimagined finale is complete without diving headfirst into satire, enter Amanda Waller. Yes, from Suicide Squad. She walks into the cell, stone-faced, and delivers her pitch. Tony, I'm putting together a team. With a sigh and a world-weary bite of his prison sandwich, Tony mutters, Marone, what are we, some kind of Pucciak Suicide Squad? Cue Mbop by Hanson. Because if you're going to torch prestige television, do it with a boy band anthem and your foot on the gas. As a final act of lunacy, or perhaps genius, we're taken to Janice. Yes, Janice. Forever chaos in a discount tracksuit. She's doing 10 years for felony brutality and, inexplicably, assaulting zoo animals. She sits in a prison stall, her frizzy mane cascading like a forgotten chia pet. As the opening riffs of Freebird begin their climb, the camera creeps closer. She looks up. Through the oily curtain of bangs, we see it. Tony's smirking face. Then, black screen. It's grotesque. It's indulgent. It's oddly poetic. All of it underscores a singular truth. The beauty of The Sopranos' real ending was not in what it showed, but in what it refused to reveal. These alternative endings, for all their imagination and mockery, only reinforce how perfectly Chase's abrupt cut denied closure in the most fittingly brutal way possible. Still, if you're going to rewrite television history, why not go out swinging? With cheese sandwiches, cinematic shapeshifting, a prison toilet aria, and Tony Soprano as a potential avenger. Emmy voters, take note. Meadow Soprano is just Tony with better PR. Let's talk about it. In The Sopranos, few characters embody the show's generational cycles of self-deception and delusion quite like Meadow Soprano. By the time we reach the episode University, it becomes increasingly clear.
So, how was the drama queen doing anyway?
Meadow isn't just Tony's daughter by blood. She's inherited his finest legacy of performative self-righteousness and blind hypocrisy. The episode draws a stark, almost cinematic parallel between Meadow and Tracy, the doomed bada-bing dancer. The visual juxtaposition, Meadow opening a door, Tracy walking through another, signals what the script is already shouting. These two young women exist on opposite ends of a brutal social spectrum. Tracy sells her body to afford orthodontic care. Meadow, cushioned by affluence, can't be bothered to schedule a dentist appointment. One is swallowed by circumstance, the other floats above it, blissfully unaware. Tracy's tragic fate is a mirror held up to Meadow's unexamined privilege, but Meadow, of course, doesn't bother to look. Enter Caitlin, Meadow's college roommate, a woman clearly unraveling, struggling with homelessness in the city around her, grappling with mental illness, self-destructive behavior, and isolation. And what does Meadow offer in response? Not compassion, not patience, certainly not perspective. No, just disdain. Caitlin's breakdowns disgust her. She regards Caitlin's very human unraveling as weak, even offensive.
It's a good thing we're paying for that dorm room.
Meanwhile, Meadow reacts to the same grim urban chaos by hopping in a car and retreating to the comforts of suburban maternal embrace. Her coping mechanism is a cozy night in with Mom. Caitlin's is tearing her own hair out in a cinder block dorm room. The irony? Meadow doesn't see any of this. She doesn't recognize her emotional dependence on a safety net made of hugs, home-cooked meals, and financial support. She dismisses Caitlin for lacking resilience while being utterly reliant on her own very expensive cocoon. Sound familiar? It should. Tony Soprano does the same thing every week.
Nowadays, everybody's got to go to shrinks and
Dispensing tough love sermons about bootstraps and backbone before sobbing into a leather chair in Melfi's office, Meadow didn't just absorb her father's worldview, she replicates it flawlessly. Some may argue that Meadow is simply a freshman, young, overwhelmed, and understandably self-absorbed. And yes, there's a fair case to be made for adolescent blindness. But the critique isn't that Meadow isn't a fully formed moral philosopher by 18. The critique is that she passes judgment with the confidence of someone who thinks she is. She scorns Caitlin for seeking connection and care while doing the exact same thing under a more socially acceptable label. And then there's her moral evolution. Meadow's later activism, her rejection of her parents' casual racism, her work with immigrants, all commendable. But let's not be so quick to hand her a halo. Moral awakening, while necessary, doesn't erase hypocrisy. It merely decorates it in better language. Ultimately, Meadow is Tony's true successor, not in violence, but in selective empathy. She demands that others get over it, while reserving the right to collapse safely into the arms of her privilege whenever the world gets a little too real. Her judgment of Caitlin mirrors Tony's derision of weakness in others, while seeking therapy for his own wounds. In both cases, the rules apply to everyone else. Tony once told Dr. Melfi, "It's all a big nothing." Meadow, apparently, took notes and added her own footnote. "Nothing for you, everything for me." Junior Soprano was never in charge, and the show made sure you knew it. In the early episodes of The Sopranos, Junior Soprano is often flanked by a flock of elderly men, gray-suited, stone-faced, and largely mute. They gather at diners, linger behind chairs, and nod solemnly at meetings. But who exactly are they? Wise guys or window dressing? As the series progresses, it becomes painfully clear. Whatever they once were, they're now little more than ceremonial relics.
My friend Brendan, you shot him in his bathtub naked.
When Junior's war with Tony ignites in Season 1, the hit list includes only Mikey Palmici and Chucky Signore, 2 active players. The rest of the geriatric entourage is conspicuously untouched. They're either too irrelevant to bother with, or too infirm to pose a threat.
Johnny Sack? Johnny Sack was here?
This absence is further underscored at Junior's ceremony, where none of his usual hangers-on are in sight. Instead, the event is attended by the actual power brokers, capos, Johnny Sack, and representatives from New York. The implication is unmistakable. Junior's regular table of retirees is not the mob. They're the matinee crowd.
So your uncle's under indictment?
By Season 2, the composition of his real crew becomes clearer. Patsy Parisi and Philly Parisi, before his abrupt demise, were in the mix, along with Bobby Baccalieri.
It's becoming clear to me Murph can't run my operations while I'm in court.
Murph, the ever-ineffectual relic, eventually gets replaced. Junior himself admits the man can no longer handle the job. Another barely defined figure, Tommy, lingers in scenes but contributes about as much to the plot as a forgotten prop. Were they made guys? Likely, but made guys of a bygone era. Vestiges of a time when their presence mattered. Now, they're little more than what Ray Curto aspired to be. Peripheral, unburdened by actual responsibility, and just close enough to the action to enjoy the perks without the pressure. Of course, none of this negates The Sopranos' true genius, its gallows humor. Few shows have so gleefully weaponized political incorrectness with such precision.
The fucking Chinese fire driller.
Whether it's Junior cracking about a Chinese godfather, he made them an offer they couldn't understand, or Chrissy sincerely asking if Chinks did this, the writing walks a fine line between offensive and absurd.
I'm not gay.
You're not?
No.
One dinner scene at Columbia is particularly lethal in its comedic dissection of generational ignorance. AJ, with the clueless confidence of a suburban teen, marvels that they had fags back then. Tony, in an almost touching display of misguided politeness, quickly apologizes to the guest, then double takes when the man corrects him. "I'm not gay." Tony, completely floored, responds with genuine surprise. "You're not?" The exchange is both grotesquely inappropriate and impeccably timed. The awkward silence that follows, anchored by Meadow's mortified glance, seals it as one of the funniest scenes in the entire series. Is it racist? Absolutely. Is it intentional? Undeniably. The Sopranos doesn't excuse these moments. It weaponizes them to lay bare the characters' prejudices, their ignorance, and the culture they inhabit. Nothing is sacred, and that's the point. As for Junior, his cadre of crypt keepers serves a narrative function. They remind us that mafia leadership, like so many outdated institutions, often values appearance over effectiveness. These men might once have been feared, respected, or relevant. Now, they're just extras in a story that no longer needs them, hollow ornaments for Junior to stroke his ego and prop up his fading stature. In a world that runs on perception, the illusion of power sometimes matters more than power itself. Just ask Junior, or better yet, ask Murph, if he can stay awake long enough to answer. Jackie Aprile wasn't a tragic loss. He was the last speed bump on Tony's road to disaster. In the grand opera of The Sopranos, no character's death casts a longer shadow than Jackie Aprile Sr.'s. The irony, of course, is that he barely made it past the first act.
DeMayo, currently serving a life.
Yet, his early exit left a power vacuum that ripped the New Jersey crime family apart at its already fraying seams. One can't help but wonder, if Jackie hadn't succumbed to cancer, would the DeMayo family have dodged the internal implosion that followed? Jackie was, remarkably, respected across the board, a feat in a world where respect usually requires a trail of bodies or a prison stint. The old guard trusted him. The younger guys followed him. Even New York, notoriously allergic to anyone from Jersey not named Carmine, didn't flinch while Jackie held the reins. But Jackie was never fully in charge, at least not in his own mind.
Jackie, you're the boss. Tell him to leave Carmine trucking alone.
Despite being anointed boss by the imprisoned Ercole DeMayo himself, Jackie insisted on treating his leadership as a temporary arrangement, a mere seat warmer for the ghost of a bygone era. That deference, noble or not, weakened his grip. He never named a successor, likely because he never saw himself as one in the first place. That kind of ambivalence doesn't exactly inspire loyalty or fear. Still, his appointment ignited predictable tensions.
Your uncle resents that you're the boss.
Corrado Soprano's bruised ego was practically visible from space after being passed over in favor of someone younger, more capable, and less prone to quoting old opera lyrics at Sunday dinner. But Junior would have resented anyone who wasn't his brother. Jackie just happened to be standing in the way when the inheritance papers were metaphorically signed. Had Jackie lived, the chain reaction of dysfunction might have been avoided altogether. No proxy war between Tony and Junior, no Richie Aprile uprising, no domino effect of bloodshed and backroom power grabs. If Jackie and Junior had gone down together in the S1 Rico sweep, The leadership transition could have been far less explosive, Tony sliding into power with more calm than chaos. But alas, Cancer had other plans, and Tony inherited not just the throne, but the mess beneath it. It's almost quaint to imagine a peaceful transfer of mob power, though. After all, the rot was already setting in. Salvatore Bonpensiero was wired up before the pilot episode even aired. The FBI was in the house.
You know, the government's using electronic surveillance.
Rico had changed the rules. Gone were the days of honor among thieves, replaced by a parade of wise guys eager to swap their principles for plea deals. The feds stopped throwing 5-year bids at these guys and started tossing around life sentences like party favors. Turns out Omerta has a much shorter shelf life when it comes with a 20-year expiration date.
I came too late for that. I know. But lately I'm getting the feeling.
Tony himself admitted it from the start. He came in at the end. A man born to play king of a crumbling castle. And make no mistake, the fall wasn't just coming, it had already arrived.
They had me, Tony.
Informants were everywhere, from Pussy to Ray Curto to Eugene Pontecorvo, and even Carlo Gervasi by the bitter end. It wasn't a question of if someone would turn, it was just a matter of when. In that context, Jackie surviving would have bought time, not salvation. Yes, some of the more dramatic internal fractures might have been avoided, but the long-term trajectory? Inevitable. Tradition means little when everyone's afraid of dying in prison. Surveillance, DNA, forensics, both real and pseudoscientific, had made the Mafia's old playbook obsolete. What Jackie represented was a dying breed of mobster, trying to lead an organization already cracking under modern pressure. Even if he'd stuck around, the idea that Jackie could have indefinitely held off New York's ambition, curbed Junior's resentment, and kept Tony's defiance in check is laughably optimistic. Egos don't evaporate just because the boss has nice hair and a calm demeanor. Jackie might have been the gentleman gangster, but he wasn't immortal, and he wasn't ruthless enough to stem the tide of betrayal. In the end, The Sopranos was never about whether the family could be saved. It was about watching it slowly, inevitably fall apart. Jackie's death didn't cause the collapse. It simply removed the last illusion of stability. Subscribe for more.